So today we're going to go over CIS Framework Controls V8. It's a continuation. This class is going to be five modules. So we've already done the first 20 or so. We have to do around 30 per class or a little around there. So I might pick up the pace a little bit. These are extremely complicated technically. So I'm going to be throwing out a lot of terms. But let's get started so that we can keep pace with what we're doing.
Hey
Uh,
Gregory, if you've got to go slower, we'll just extend. It's okay.
okay.
So do it however you need to.
All right. I just didn't want to miss any controls. Okay, data protection. So what is data? Data is usually referred to as information stored on your database servers. So when you're dealing with data, they're talking about database information in a lot of these areas, and then data can also include files and folders within your infrastructure that you store information on that is relevant to what you're working on, plans, files, policies, procedures. Data is not necessarily like your operating system information and that kind of thing. Those are usually not included in data management. But stuff in the SQL servers, your SAP servers, your Mongo database servers, that's usually what we refer to as data. So 3.1, establish and maintain a data management process. So data management, you want to have some sort of a workflow document or policy and procedure in this situation where you're talking about how your data enters your organization, how it moves through your organization, whether it goes through an application to a database, and then from the database it goes to potentially a backup system, and from the backup system it goes to possibly offsite storage or something like that. So you want to have a workflow of how your data moves throughout your company. You want to have a situation where information that comes in goes to a particular place, usually stays there. The movement of data is called data in motion. So data in motion is important, and data at rest, when it sits in its place for a long period of time, not moving around. That's data at rest. Those two concepts are important for us as we move forward here in the data area. So data in motion is when data comes into your web server or your application server and is processed in there, manipulated, changed, added, entered into a form, and then when it gets to your database, it moves from your application server to your database server. So you want to ensure that that process of that movement and possibly the separation or segregation of that data to another system for processing is outlined inside of a management workflow document. 3.2, establish and maintain a data inventory, where you keep your data, what silos it's inside of your SQL SAP server. It should be in database storage units. So those storage units are called different things for the different servers. Those storage units are going to house the data. If you have HIPAA data and it's in a particular database module, you want to identify where it's stored inside of a document. Again, these are two documents and they're going to sit in your environment. They usually don't have to be changed unless you're going to add another database instance or you're going to create a new folder. But for the most part, these are going to be static documents you create one time, maybe update once a year. Configure data access control lists. So you need to have an identity engine like Active Directory or IAM or Azure Active Directory or LDAP or something similar to that. Your identity engine is going to be made up of roles, user accounts, usernames, and those identities are going to have the ability to access information. You want to separate out. Sorry, I have a dog. You want to separate out the database, who has control to what access for each of the database instances. So you're going to want to make sure that that is outlined I would just create groups inside of the document. Don't call out individuals, or else you'll have to sit there and modify that database data access control list every time someone moves laterally inside your company to different positions or quits, or every time you hire somebody. So you should just have database groups of individuals that can access that data. Enforce data retention. So different rules have different amounts of time that you need to keep data for. In the medical world, it's sometimes up to 7 years. In tax world, it's 7 years. It's also certain amount of time for HIPAA. It's certain amount of time for, and there's rules and regulations that the government has established for data retention. So you want to keep that data. You can compress it. You can store it on external hard drives once they move them around in your infrastructure, or you can even create something called like glacial storage for in Amazon, where it's cold storage. These are the storage things we talked about last week: hot, warm, and cold storage. So you're going to want to keep that data possibly in cold storage as longer and longer time, the retention time that you have. You should consult your rules according to either your vendor or the law. There's different time frames for keeping data. So but you should have a data retention policy. You should discuss how long you keep your data for, and then you should do that. You should implement it. Securely dispose of data. So if you're going to delete data, that's fine. If you're going to have data on hard drives, you're going to want to physically destroy that data, or you're going to want to use something like a mixer, a tool that mixes up all of the bits and bytes on a hard drive so that it's unreadable, or they're called shredders. So you can get a hard drive shredder, which will get rid of the data. It can also encrypt it before it does that, and so on and so forth. So you can do all those different things to dispose your data, but one of the things is to physically destroy the hard drives that it sits on, and or delete it, shred it, or delete it, and make sure that you dispose of the hard drives appropriately. Encrypt data on end user devices. BitLocker is the most common form of encryption now because it's on Windows workstations. You can use BitLocker. It'll encrypt your machine. That's just common. Macs have encryption data apps. Linux servers have encryption data apps. Servers can use BitLocker, or you can even go with something like PGP, where you make your own encryption package. But as long as you encrypt that data, then you're going to be fine. You should also have an encryption policy that says we encrypt data. This is how we do it. This is what application we use, so on and so forth. So not only should you do it, you should talk about it in a document. Establish and maintain a data classification scheme. At larger Fortune 500 companies, when you go in there, they have different levels of data. Data is level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Level 1 data could be just files and folders, information that is commonly accessible to the public. Level 2 might be sensitive data, internal only data. Level 3 might be data that's not meant for public or ever to be shown to the public. And level 4 might be information with social security numbers on it, phone numbers, personal data information. And level 5 might be top secret or intellectual property. But you want to classify all those different levels of documents, and then you want to maintain some sort of a structure within your organization that where each of those data are siloed. So if you have level 1 data accessible to the public, that kind of thing, you're going to make you might not have as tough a security profile established against it, like encryption, access to it is limited. These are the things you can do to when you classify your data. If you have level 5 data, maybe contractors and people who aren't employees can't look at it. So you have roles, you have locations in your infrastructure that only certain roles can access. Maybe it's encrypted, maybe it's in a like an ITAR room where it is separated on a network that has no is zero touch to the other parts of the network. Only people with clearance can go in that room, so not even all the employees can, that kind of thing. So you're going to want to establish the levels of access that you also have to the data that you classify. So don't just classify the data and walk away. You're going to say, okay, here are the roles and responsibilities that have access to each of the levels of data, and here's how we protect each of the levels of data. Document data flows. Again, you need to have some sort of a workflow from number 3.2, that establishes how data moves through your organization. So you want to have data workflows. Data comes in to a particular area, to my workstation, to my application server, to my web server. Someone clicks a contact us button on your web server. That information then goes to my CRM system. My CRM system then stores it after it gets manipulated to my SQL Server database. The SQL Server database is backed up nightly to my cloud backup system, Azure Active, Azure Backup, or some other backup, Veritas backup. It's then stored there. Then we take the disk or the tapes or the hard drives that we back it up to. We move it to Iron Mountain on Fridays of every month. And then when after 2, 3, 5, 7 years, we bring it back and we either recycle those drives and tapes by formatting them, or we delete them, or we destroy them. So that's an example of a workflow that's simplified. You want to create those workflow documents. You use PowerPoint or Word to create a workflow type of a document. They have these arrows and boxes. So use the arrow box methodology. You can find that anywhere on the internet, examples of what a workflow looks like. Encrypt data on removable media. So we were talking just a few seconds ago about when the workflow hit to the backups used tapes or external hard drives that we were going to use to store data on, for retention purposes, disaster recovery purposes, and for maybe long-term retention policies. The data on those drives needs to be encrypted. You can encrypt a drive with BitLocker. You can encrypt a drive with your backup software. You want to make sure you're using a backup software that allows for data encryption so that you can encrypt the backup information that you're using. So this is really centered around backups. You could have removable data for retention purposes, but for the most part, that would almost be a backup of your information. But removable data isn't normally used for anything else but backup, except for when you have a thumb drive and you want to take data off of your infrastructure, put it on thumb drive. You want to make sure that that thumb drive or removable USB drive you have for whatever purpose you're using it for is also encrypted. And again, you can use BitLocker or PGP, or you can use some of these thumb drives have their own encryption software built into them. Okay, encrypt sensitive data in transit. So we were talking about data in motion. They call it data in transit here. Data in motion and data in transit is data that is moving. It's moving from one place to another. It's moving from point A to point B. It's moving from your application server to your database server. It's moving from your database server to your backup media. It's moving from your file server to your workstation. It's moving from the person who's entering data at home into your web server. That's moving from there over the internet into your infrastructure. How do you do that? You can encrypt it using SSL when you're externally, or TLS internally. You just need a person to help you understand. You show them your data workflow and you say to them, look, I need to encrypt data as it's moving throughout my organization. So then they're going to show you, or they're going to tell you, okay, data moving from your web server to your database server is going to be encrypted using SSL, TLS, whatever encryption algorithm you want to use, whatever encryption process you want to use. It's all available inside now. Nothing has this missing, so you're going to be able to turn these features on. What's the downside of this? It makes things a little slower because it's encrypting it as it goes, but for the most part, unless you're using tens of thousands of transactions, you do not need to worry about the slowness of data in transit. Later on, there are just as a side note, there are appliances that just do data encryption and decryption in transit. Because if you have a million transactions an hour or 100,000 transactions an hour, the amount of time it takes to decrypt and encrypt traffic is enormous. So you need actually separate servers that just sit there and do decryption and encryption on your data. So be aware. If you become that successful, we could talk about it separately, but for the most part, you don't need to worry about it slowing you down. Encrypt sensitive data at rest. Again, data was moving. Where it moved from point A to point B, it was encrypted during that transition. But now that it's arrived at point B and it's sitting there inside of your a SQL server or your SAP server or your database server of whatever kind you produce or create MySQL, that needs to be encrypted at that location. Now, databases have encryption features. You just turn them on like switches. You just flip the switch and say, I want all my data to be encrypted, and it's encrypted. Similarly, there's a switch inside of your backup software. If it's enterprise, if it's just you copying files from one point to another, you can do that. But again, you'd have to have BitLocker enabled on the destination drive. But for the most part, if you use a backup software, tons of options in there to encrypt in motion and at rest. So you don't really have to worry about it. You just need to turn those things on and then identify that you're performing those tasks inside of your encryption and data transfer policy. You're going to have a policy called encryption policy, and you're going to talk about it in there. Segment data processing and storage based on sensitivity. So data processing is when data is being manipulated by something like a person, and storage is where it's just basically sitting there. So data processing is like me, you know, opening a file, looking at it, maybe adding something to it, subtracting something from it, doing my job basically, working on it. And then storage is, it being just sitting there, data at rest. What you want to do is you want to make sure that, when you identified your data, where your data was stored, that you want to, and you have your data classification policy where you have data classified 1 through 5, you want to store it in separate database modules or database engines or database servers by sensitivity. You can make multiple silos within one server with different database instances and then store the sensitive data in those instances based on their sensitivity or classification. So just because you have a database server doesn't mean that it only has one database. You can have 5 databases in a database server. They can all be accessible by your applications. It takes a little bit more configuration, but they're all available and accessible. They just need to be segregated by classification, and that classification usually is separated by sensitivity. Deploy a data loss prevention solution. So DLP is what data loss prevention is. Data loss prevention is an application. It's not a state of mind. It's not a frame of mind. It's not a policy. It's an application called DLP. It is available through something like through Trend Micro has a DLP module in it. There are firewalls with DLP modules in them like PAN, Palo Alto Networks, and next generation firewalls, NGFWs. And you can also buy pieces of equipment solely that just do that. Those are expensive. They cost anywhere from 5 to 18 grand. But the application level stuff, the lower end, smaller stuff like on your firewall is cheaper than that, and it won't cost as much. It has somewhat limited functionality, but wherever you have egress, you want to have DLP. Whereas egress, it's where you can have people like emails and egress system where data can flow out of it. Your computer's ports, your computer's USB ports are egress. Your computer's some of the protocols inside of your computer like FTP, SFTP, Telnet, and that kind of thing have the capability of egress. And so what the DLP does is it watches those ports and emails for certain patterns, uses AI, and if it sees, like, for instance, a large amount of files being copied from your computer to your USB port, it'll either block it or warn you and say, hey, something's going on here. Why is Steve in accounting copying everything in the financial folder to a USB drive? And it says alert, it'll send you an alert. That alert needs to go to a ticketing system. It needs to go to a group of people who have roles and responsibilities that support the fact that you've had the situation, and then you need to react to it. You need to have an incident response plan where you identify what you're going to do in the event that this happens, and then you need to follow the plan. You need to update and manage and moderate the ticket, and then you need to have a post-mortem after it all happened and talk about it in your incident response document. We have incident response templates that we can share with you. If you ask Jeremy, he'll send you one. But for the most part, you need to have a whole process. This DLP solution is a little bit of an obscurity because there's like 10 things that go into it: the product, the response, the team, the roles, setting up your ticketing system, the flow of how things are going to happen, and how you resolved it and what you did. So that's a solution. It's just not just the software. Don't just buy the software and think you're done after you've set it up. Log sensitive data access. So normally you wouldn't have all your files and folders open to the world. You wouldn't have an accounting folder without roles and responsibilities associated with it. But if somebody's trying to bang on it by trying to open it, clicking on the folder, double clicking on, triple clicking on the folder, click, 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 and they're trying to get in there, there's a way that your systems can react to it and see this inside of Windows or inside of Linux or Mac and say, hey, this person is trying to access this folder, and they keep trying to click on it. Now, sometimes the folder or the area they're trying to access might not just be a file folder. It might be a location, and it might represent them with a password and username. And they might try their own, and they might try others, and they could be sitting there trying and trying and trying. And if they're doing that, the system's going to log it. So you need to have what's called a SIEM, SIEM. When you have a SIEM product, you're going to be able to log all the different things that someone does inside your organization. You could also have what's called a HIDS or a NIDS, where the HIDS and NIDS, which we talked about last time, are going to track when someone's trying to access data on someone else's machine, on a file server. You can also have file protection systems where, or file integrity. It's file integrity software. It's another market. File integrity means that you make sure that no one's trying to do touching of your sensitive data. And by the way, DLP will help you here as well. So if you have a DLP system, or you have HIDS, NIDS, or you have a file integrity system, all of them are going to be able to give you a log into your SIM that says, Gregory tried to click on salaries folder. He tried to open the accounting folder. He tried to click on this folder called top secret, and he has no access. He did this 12 times yesterday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's something you want to go and have an incident response plan for and go, okay, what happens when one of our employees tries to open another employee's computer? or whatever, and you're going to want to react to it. Maybe he needs to see HR, maybe you terminate him, maybe you arrest him and put him in prison. All these things are possibilities. So have a policy, have a solution based on somebody trying to access data. All right, establish and maintain a secure configuration process. So what you want to do here is you want to make sure that you create a policy or procedure that that talks about security, like a security plan. So you're going to have what's called a security plan. In your security plan, you can have you don't need to, sometimes people think I need to have a separate security plan for each of my documents. And this product Lionfish here supports that kind of a thinking methodology. If you want to create a policy and a procedure for every single one of these controls, you can. I don't necessarily believe in that, and Lionfish will support it as well. But I like to put like maybe 5 or 6 or 10 things into one document. It's easier on everyone if everything's in the same place, but you don't have to do it that way. You can, but what you should do is create at least create a security policy and talk about how software and assets and information inside your organization is maintained and how it is configured. What are the steps you take to secure your software, to secure your operating systems, to secure your network infrastructure? You want to have a process that goes along with best practices. You can use something called ITIL. ITIL is like a British London-based international standard for um, how to maintain IT and how to step by step go through IT processes. If you follow that and you mirror or copy that and put it into your document here, you're going to be fine. Establish and maintain a secure configuration process for network infrastructure. So for your software and your operating systems and your servers, you have your security configuration process and plan. It doesn't mirror the network. The network is servers, routers, firewalls, access points, switches. Those are the network infrastructure. So when someone says network infrastructure, they're talking about those devices. They're not talking about your servers, workstations, applications, or other inventory items, phones, that kind of thing. So the first one, having a secure configuration process, ITIL based for your operate workstations and servers. The second one's for your network infrastructure. Configure automatic session locking on enterprise assets. So this is like used to be in the old days. You could, and sometimes today, you could just leave your computer on forever. It would just never shut down. It would sit there in the same state it's always been in the whole time. Especially old school terminals. You could just leave a terminal on maybe for decades. I mean, nothing would change. Well, those days are over. We need to lock the screen. So what happens is after 15, 20, 30, 45 minutes, you walk away from your computer, your screen locks. This is a function of the operating system or something called a global policy or a computer policy. And it depends on what kind of network Active Directory, if you use that, or you use some other kind of system that manages all your workstations at once, you're going to want to make sure that those sessions are locked. Your screens are locked. Now, inside of Active Directory, inside of your computer, in the computer management area, there's actually a section that talks about how long something will stay live for, like a share. Like if somebody's connected to your share and it's idle for 15 to 20 minutes, you can set it so that they are disconnected and they need to reconnect to your share. And their machine may automatically do this, but there are protocols built into your computer, in your computer management, in the group policy section that explicitly discuss how long something can be connected to you for, and that it just doesn't connect to you forever. And nowadays there are things called that prevent man-in-the-middle attacks There are things that prevent, you know, session injections and all these different types of hacker attacks. A hacker can borrow your session and re-establish connection. I'm sure you've seen this where you were you're at the bank with your browser and you close your browser and then you open your browser up a couple minutes later and you're still connected to the bank and you're like, well, how did that happen? That's a session. So your session is connected and it just reconnected. It didn't lose enough time didn't go by so that you lost your connection. Well, what we want to do is make sure that after a certain amount of time, you just can't reconnect to something and have it be the way it was while you were logged into it. We want to break the session and lock it so that no one can access that particular session. And all this is built in stuff to modern day applications, firewalls, VPNs, routers, web servers. All that stuff has this capability. You just need to turn it on. One more. Implement and manage a firewall on servers. So each of these servers, Windows, Mac, Linux, mainframe, all these servers have the capabilities of turning on a firewall on the server itself. So you have firewalls that are outside the infrastructure that work for the network safety overall, but what they're asking you to do here is turning on a firewall, particularly on the server itself. There are actually firewall apps that do a better job than like the built-in Windows firewall. You can get a firewall app, especially from some of these next generation firewall companies. They have applications that you can sit on your firewall. And when you're in the cloud, much easier to do this, the firewall applications on the servers. But if you have a lot of on-prem servers, you would just install firewalls on those servers. Windows firewall is a perfect example of just turning that on and having that, configuring that properly so that it works. And there you go. You're done with the firewall. You've implemented it, and you need to make sure that you just don't turn it on and leave it because it's going to block certain kinds of traffic, like SQL traffic is not natively allowed through the server firewall. So you have to create rules inside the firewall on that server to allow for particular types of traffic. All right, that is our class for today. Let's look. We have some questions. Any questions that we have, but this is deep, complex stuff. A lot of it says just do DLP, and you're like, okay, wow, that's like 9 different things to do. It's a lot of stuff. Just implementing the solution takes a lot of effort, and it's not just flipping a switch like maybe on the firewall for the server. It's just turning it on. Like implementing DLP is tough. It's not simple. It takes a lot. It's a project. It's going to take time. It's going to cost money. All right. And while we're waiting to hear anybody thinking about chats, I wanted to do an advertisement. Jeremy can send you the link to this, or you can see this link here in the chat. He's hosting a CMMC and CCP and CCA certification training course. So I encourage you, if you want to become certified for CMMC, Lionfish is sponsoring this. Like I put this right here in the chat, or Jeremy might beat me. He might beat me. No, I didn't. So take this course and you become a CMMC professional. And then after that, you can become an auditor and make more money or just have the certificate for yourself. But again, it's this little, oh, I put it in the chat. Maybe it's a direct message. Oh, my bad. Everybody in meeting. I was telling Jeremy something. Now I put it in there. Now it's there. Yeah, good. All right. Anybody have any questions? Nothing, anything? We went over a lot. Again, this control set is much more technical than most because it talks about like HIDs, NIDs, SIM, DLP, encryption, firewalls, NGFWs, group policies, Active Directory. Man, it's got the whole shebang. You really need to have some kind of a network in you can't just be working from home off your Mac laptop. You're going to need to have some sort of network infrastructure to meet a lot of these controls. But what if you don't? You can still create the process, the policy, and the procedure of what you would do if you did have it. So if I had a firewall, I would configure it to do the following. Or here's the process of setting up a firewall in my infrastructure. That's good enough. A lot of you don't have large scale networks. That's okay. Still complete the control by saying what you would do. So if you had a policy that said, look, if I had workstations in my environment, that data moved from point A to point B, I would use, TLS, or I would use SSL to move the data from my application server to my, just create a hypothetical situation and create a policy around it. Imagine you have it and then create a policy around it. This is going to help you a lot, because if in the future you do get that stuff, you're going to be ready. And number two, if an audit occurs, you're not going to miss points for not having that situation be addressed. You want to at least address the situation. If you're not going to do it, you want to address it still. So don't just skip these and say not applicable or not in my environment, so I don't have to worry about it. Don't do that. That's a mistake. Create the policy, create the procedure, even if it's just a skeletal framework or a shell, at least make it as a placeholder for the future, or make it as a process you're going to follow in the event that you do go ahead and get a role-based Active Directory, or if you use IAM, because when you go there, you're going to have the ability to show people that you've considered it, you have a process, you have a policy, you have a procedure. It's going to make you way more attractive than if you just say not applicable. I don't do that, or I don't have that. Don't do that. That's a boo-boo. Yes. Okay. Jeffrey says SQL injection attacks are some of the top hacker attacks, and he suggests using the DARE system. Yes, SQL injection attacks are very common. You don't want to expose your SQL server to the internet. You want to protect it at all costs. And there are applications you can install on to your SQL system and best practices you can do that will prevent the injection attacks from occurring. Injection attacks are move forward. So sometimes you'll have a virus that just attacks, the fact that you have an old DLL on your system, right? That's not what a SQL injection attack does. They are constantly modifying the injection attacks and moving forward with those, so that they're an ongoing problem versus just like the ABC virus, right? If you have the ABC virus and you have this particular DLL and you could catch it, right? And oh no, you're compromised. All you got to do is upgrade your computer and you're good, right? You never have the ABC virus again. Usually they'll leave it alone. They'll say, okay, ABC virus, without haha, that was funny. Let's go on to the DEF virus. This is a whole different one that attacks a different DLL. That's not the case with a SQL injection attack. SQL injection attack is almost like a routine, a process. They have different points in the attack vector that they can change, and they do change to make it successful. So be aware, SQL injection attacks are a little bit different than like a virus or malware or ransomware. They're an evolving threat. So be aware that if you think you're safe from an injection attack, you may be safe today, but not tomorrow. So you want to take best practice steps to avoid them. And you also want to have detection software that can possibly look for 0-day attacks. A 0-day attack is an attack that your antivirus software doesn't recognize it, but thinks that if something is happening, it's very strange that it's happening because it's not normal. Someone's doing something not normal against your environment, and so the AI module says, well, this is out of the ordinary activity. I'm going to investigate it, and if it feels it's a 0 day, which means that there's no virus definition, no countermeasure for it, it's going to call it out to you and say, somebody outside your organization is trying on port like 46 to access your environment or something. They're scanning this port repeatedly. It's very weird. And so, yeah, that's strange. And you're like, wow, okay, let's do something about that. In the past, some of these 0 day attacks have used brute force to like scan up, for instance, to scan up a particular port a million trillion times or whatever, and it overloads the firewall's memory, and then the firewall kind of trips out and crashes, creating a DDoS, denial of service, and that could be a distributed denial of service across multiple computers. But it creates a DOS, denial of service attack, that you weren't even aware of, that there's no built-in countermeasure for, but that your system can take care of it as a 0 day. SQL injection attacks are commonly 0 day. So yes, good call. Yes, there's attack. There are hacker groups out there that are using these attacks to do DOS, to try to overload the system, to try to cripple it, to try to slow it down, to try to open it up so they can put an admin account in there so they can get greater access to it. But yes, there are hacker groups that attack you using the SQL injection attack methodology, especially with 0 day back end. Anybody else? Anybody else have anything? Red Hat Collective. There are a bunch of these groups of hackers. Usually they don't attack small companies, one-man shows, a couple, but I've actually had it happen more and more often where IT service providers are now being attacked. You can go on the dark web and hire the Red Hat Collective if you want. You can go on there and hire them to attack another company. Of course, that's illegal, but other people could do it against you. They have a vendetta against you and attack you by paying some bitcoins to a Red Hat Collective to a DDoS your web server or try to break in. And if you're an IT person, usually you could have sensitive data, and then that could be compromised. I've seen it before. You read about it. There was a small IT group that was handling all the Medicare processing. They got attacked multiple times. But healthcare used to be off limits. It's no longer off limits to hackers. It used to be off limits from like some sort of a of a perspective that they didn't want to mess with other people's health, but now it's attacked. Yes, you're right, Jeffrey. Small companies get hacked to get to bigger companies. Small companies, especially small IT firms, will be attacked because they're doing the IT. If someone finds out you're doing the IT for a larger organization, they're going to attack you and try to compromise you so they can get passwords and access to that organization through you. So absolutely be wary that if you're an IT service provider or an IT company, you have to have exceptional security. Yes, vendors as well. That's right. You are correct. Be careful if you're a vendor. Anybody else have any questions or comments they'd like to make? That's what I'm here for at this second half of this. Well, if you want any recommendations about what SIM to get, what what DLP to buy, reach out to Jeremy. He has some great recommendations. Again, want to just re-advertise the fact that we as Lionfish are given a CMMC course that you can sign up for. Yes, Jeremy will share this recording. He shares all of them. So just poking for the link, I think there's a site where you can go and get it all at once. So if you can see all the past shows. But again, if you want to be a CMMC professional or a CMC assessor, which they're going to need a lot of, I only think there's like 13 of them at this time right now. So if you want to break into a new job, new market, new something new that's just starting out that everyone's going to have to do, there might be only 13 to 30 assessors at the moment. If you become one, you could potentially strike it rich. Yeah, that's right. Jump on that code, and you can get in that class, get those skills. No, 35. No, that's not true. No, I think I just, at least people around from where I'm at make more than that working at fast food. So no, that's not going to be your salary. You have to be some sort of a IT professional to be able to do an audit at that level, be able to say to somebody and be, you know, yeah, maybe the assessment is 35K. You make that every 40 hours or every week, but that's not your salary now. So that's right. That's more like it, Jeffrey. That's like the whole package. But yeah, please sign up for that class, and you're good to go. All right. Anything else? Anyone else? All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you again next week. We'll continue on. Stopped off at the firewalls, so we'll go 4-4 next time. Thanks.